because of his talent and ability. Look at Isaiah 14, the companion passage to Ezekiel 28 here. Isaiah chapter 14. He became lifted up in his heart and his attitude, and this started to pervert his reasoning. It started to twist and to pervert his thinking. I was reading a book recently just about some of the history of Jerusalem, and this scholar, he actually used to be a minister, but he was going back to long before civilization really emerged in the form of cities and such there in Jerusalem. And the way he mocked certain incidents in the Bible, like the flood and those things, of course, those didn't happen in his mind. And then he started going back to, what was going on millions of years ago on this earth, and how man just sort of, because of these biological differences, there was sort of this spontaneous system of morality that sprung up. He's saying all these things as if they're just, of course they're facts. Just the craziest sounding reasoning, way, way out on a limb. And yet the things that are recorded and inspired by God to be recorded in the Bible, those he would reject just right out of hand. But listening to his reasonings with the theory of evolution, he should go back and just read how much evidence he's really got, or lack thereof, in the pages of his book. Hopefully the rest of the book will get a little more interesting. I've been skimming through some of the earlier parts, trying to get to the more interesting, relevant history that I want to look into. But here's a scholarly mind that knows too much for his own good. He's too smart for his own good. He's too smart. Why did societies emerge just 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, as far as archaeologists know? And yet these brilliant minds can say, even after acknowledging that, can then say, but of course, millions and millions of years ago, there was this and there was this transformation, there were these people, this is what they did. And they work and they try so hard, even to this day, to try to find a missing link, even if they have to create a hoax to do it. It just happens commonly. And it gets back to this vanity of mind. Verse 12, it says in Isaiah 14, "How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How are you cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north." It all started with his attitude. Mr. Armstrong said in that article I quoted at the beginning, it is Satan's attitude that is his prime evil. He does not hunger and thirst for God's righteousness. He harbors only the deep-rooted desire to do evil, to go contrary to God's law of love and righteousness. See, that is his attitude. That is his desire. That is his nature. And that attitude spread. It started with him, and then it spread through to evidently a third of the angels, Revelation 12 indicates. A third of the angels. And how long did it take him to convince these other holy angels to go contrary to God's law of love? It may have took tens of thousands of years, maybe millions of years. Who knows how long they were there living in obedience to God's love, in obedience to God's government. And yet that seed of vanity, of selfishness, of lust, it started in the smallest of ways, and then it spread. Mr. Armstrong said he knew well the method that Lucifer used. It's the rotten apple in the crate syndrome, where it just spreads through the crate. If we let it hang around, it spreads. That's the way sin works. It's also likened to leaven in the Scriptures, because it takes just a little bit for it to spread, just like that rotten apple in the crate. Look at Ephesians chapter 2, and we see how it spreads today. Ephesians 2. How can you look at this world and not see that there's a spirit working behind these movements that are gaining such momentum? Look at how fast evil is spreading. Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 1. "And you has he quickened, who were dead in trespasses and sins, wherein in time past you walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now works in the children of disobedience. See, it would be easy to just read over these verses and to not understand what they're really saying. Satan is the prince of the power of the air. Satan, as Mr. Armstrong explained in Mystery of the Ages, surcharges the air with a spirit of lust and vanity, with a spirit of discontent, dissatisfied, unhappy, miserable, negative thinking. He's filled the air with it. He broadcasts, not in words or pictures, Mr. Armstrong said, but in attitudes, in moods, in impulses. Now, he certainly has used words and pictures and things to serve his purpose. That's making matters so much worse, the technology that's available now to just disseminate with his way of thinking. But it all starts with these attitudes. Notice how it's explained in Mystery of the Ages. Satan moves on the human spirit within people to move them in attitudes of envy, jealousy, resentment, impatience, anger, bitterness, and strife. People have no realization of the tremendous power of Satan. The human spirit within each human is automatically tuned to Satan's wavelength. He says it seems as if Satan has surcharged the air over the entire earth with his attitude of self-centeredness and vanity. It's just filled with this attitude. The earth, the air. And once you're converted even, once you've repented and turned to God, once you've been baptized, this does not cut you off from those attitudes that Satan is broadcasting. It doesn't prevent ministers from turning away from God, from falling away from God's truth, as we've seen in recent years. So many ministers who've just folded everything up. Satan sees God's people primarily as a target, a prime target. He goes after children, as this passage brings out here, but not children only. I mean, he goes after parents as well. He's the author of division and strife, confusion. He's the author of that, what we see in so many families. Divorce, violence. He's going after husbands, fathers. He's targeting the role of the father. He's going after women, mothers, wives, anyone. Doesn't matter who we are, doesn't matter what our name might be, it doesn't matter how smart we may think we are or how pretty we are. Sometimes those work against us all the more, like I said, with the scholarly mind. And you could add to that the scholarly thinking, the beauty. Look at how many people today are deceived by beauty. Satan thought he was a beautiful being. And there's a lot of people on this earth today who consider themselves to be beautiful physically, but are so far from God. And they're still a target. We're all targets, aren't we? Verse 3 says, among whom also we all had our conversation in times past, in the lust of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. See, note that. It says this is the way we were in the past. When we were in the world, this was just our nature. Our nature prior to conversion was to just go along according to the ways of Satan. We don't give Satan enough credit for the attitudes and the actions that we take. Because again, our vanity likes to say, oh, well, Satan, of course, I know he exists, but he doesn't really influence me. He doesn't really get to me. But he does get to us. And that's why we've got to pray earnestly every day Mr. Armstrong, in another article I read recently, talked about how even in the room where he was writing this article to try to send to God's people, he said, even this room here that I'm in is surcharged with these attitudes. And I'm connected to it. But I'm not listening because I'm trying to keep my mind focused on what I'm writing here. That's the way we've got to be. As we go about our day, we've got to not listen to that broadcast and really focus on the things that we need to be doing spiritually. Put on the whole armor of God, it says in Ephesians 6. Let's just conclude over in James 4. Paul is saying over there in Ephesians, you've got to get up daily and put on that armor so that you're prepared to go to battle. There's a war going on, remember? Two laws, God's law and the law of sin. James chapter 4 and verse 7, it says, submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. So you remember what Mr. Armstrong said there, as I quoted at the start of the lecture, that God has no desire to go according to the ways of sin. And if we have to fight and struggle and resist, which we all do, and we should, but at the same time, that's a sign, as Mr. Armstrong brought out, that we haven't yet fully, in a 100% way, surrendered to God. Take what James says here and apply it. Submit yourselves to God. Draw near to God. He will draw near to you. Submit yourselves to God. Resist the devil. And then, as it says there, the devil will flee from you.
Today's free reprint packet, The Natural State of Man, includes the article referred to in the forum, What is a Liberal? In that article, Mr. Armstrong contrasts the attitude of God with that of our adversary, Satan the devil. The reason this subject is so critically important is because Satan works in people by broadcasting his attitudes to our minds. He is on the air, so to speak, around the world, and the human spirit that is in every person is in tune with Satan's wavelength. As we covered during the forum today, the devil does not broadcast in the words of any language. He does not broadcast in sounds. He broadcasts in attitudes of vanity, selfishness, greed, and lust, of jealousy, envy, hatred, and bitterness, and rebellion, which our minds receive, much like a radio receives a signal from a transmitter. These attitudes of Satan in the human mind are what we have come to call human nature. It is in reality Satan's nature, which he broadcasts to our minds and which we express in various ways. This little understood subject is also explained in our free booklet, Human Nature, What Is It? Call the number on your screen and ask for these two free offers, Human Nature, What Is It? And The Natural State of Man. You can also start reading both of these right now if you have access to the internet. Just go to thetrumpetdaily.com and download both pieces today. All of our literature is free. There's no cost or obligation to you.